Was a player in an RP heavy and character focused game and decided to roll up a Robin Hood type character who was a pacifist and sneaky. Problem is, even though I min-maxed for a stealth build, it basically did nothing because I was always caught by excessively high perception rolls. I asked the DM if I could homebrew a feat of some kind that could help me sneak better, since it was literally the one thing my character was supposed to be good at. DM said, "Sure, what do you have in mind?" Well, maybe if my character wears clothing of a similar color to his surroundings, then he'll get a stealth boost. Sorry, but your character is a mortal, and that sounds like some fey magic-y type stuff, so no. My stealth never got to be more useful and continued to be thwarted at every opportunity where it might be handy until the end of the game. Wearing camouflage to blend into your surroundings? What fey magic is this? Seriously guys, what is up with nerfing rogues? Do I need to make a video about this too? I touched upon this lightly in another Redditor's post, but since it's now bouncing around in my head, I'll retell the events that transpired with this garbage fire. To set the stage, this took place around 3 years ago, and the game would be run on Saturday afternoons, originally scheduled for 11 AM to 6 PM or so. My house happened to be centrally located. Everyone in the gaming group is roughly about 20 minutes away on a good day, 35 or so on a bunch of traffic. I have a large basement that I have decked out completely as a game room. I have a vast library that ranges from 1st edition all the way to 5e with Pathfinder, White Wolf, GURPS, and other titles. There are hundreds of miniatures and a 30-pound barrel of dice. I've set up a guest wireless access port for the basement, a snack area for food, and a fridge full of the drinks our game group favors. In addition to all that stuff, I do terrain crafting and 3D printing so that I can help bring my own games to life with that, as well as other props and curios. Now that that's established, on to the story proper. I reached out to a local group about being able to join a game. My friend and I, being a little older, prefer 3.5 just because it's what most of us began playing back in the day, though many of us cut our teeth in the 1st and 2nd edition D&D as well. After a few days, a local guy pinged me to say he'd be interested in running a game for us. I told him that I could probably pull in the group that I GM'd for, and he was delighted with that. He said that there was this girl he liked to game with, and he'd probably grab her up. Cool, that makes a solid group of about 6 people. He begins to tell me about the setting. It's a homebrew world that he's been working on for the last 15 or so years. Nice, that's a big chunk of time to invest into a world that you want to bring to life. He's got complex machinations going on between nations and rulers, as well as magic and psychics. In particular, there is this one locale that produces almost solely psionic denizens. Alright, I think to myself, this guy is going to want to run something that can probably make use of the piece that he's put a lot of work into, but I'm not particularly feeling or leaning in the direction of playing a psychic kind of character. I tell the DM that I'd like to play a ranger because it's been a good long while since I've been able to play, and it's a favorite class of mine. He immediately blurts out that he needs to talk to me on the phone. Alright, I'm not especially fond of being on the phone, but I consent to the call and go up to my office to talk to the guy, thinking it'll be like a quick 15-minute chat. 2.5 hours later, he's more or less mandated that I can play a ranger. But I need to have at least 2 to 3 levels of some psychic class. Oh, and we're starting at level 4. So my arm is twisted, and he tells me that I should just play a soul knife, because it's like a ranger. Spoiler? It's not. He begins to give me details about where I came from and who my parents probably are. I mean, great, but I don't even have a nebulous idea for my character. He begins to tell me how cool of an idea it would be if my character was a dark elf, but one who doesn't live underground. Oh, and a woman, and what my weapons should look like, and when I manifest them. By this time, it's close to 11 PM, and I tell the guy that I need to get going, and we can talk more about it over the coming days. I should have seen this as a red flag. It clearly was one, and I think I did see it as a red flag to an extent, but I trudged on with the hope that I could play and get some fun. I get the rest of my existing gaming group on board with this game. They're also a little apprehensive based on the call I'd had the week or so prior. In short order, the GM basically pushes everyone to having endless phone calls where he talks about his game and what everyone should be playing. I'm sure you guys can see where this is going. All aboard the Garbage Fire Express. We meet up downtown at a little game store. It's a Friday evening during the summer, and parking is more or less non-existent on narrow streets. Of note, downtown is not close for any of us. It takes a good 30 minutes for most of us to find a place to park. It takes me an hour to get down to the location just because of traffic and everything else. Suffice to say, I'm a bit more than irked at this whole ordeal, but soldier on, right? We end up getting into this tiny store, and it's cramped, dimly lit, and we're in one of the darkest corners with 8 people around a crowded table. A couple of us are going through the AEG Feats book and picking out some cool stuff that would fit our characters. We're rolling stats and generally having an impromptu session 0 at this place. It's loud and nobody can hear each other. The GM introduces us to his friend. He's a mid-40s guy, and she's not even 21. And we're all getting super weird vibes from the two of them. He tells us that he's already rolled up a character for her. Okay, I guess. Her character is a tiger person who is a paragon of his race and nobility and unparalleled in hand-to-hand combat. Rad. We go on picking feats and assigning stats, coming up with some names, etc. The GM asks to see our sheets, and in turn tells us that we should probably pick skills and feats that have the psionic slant to them. One of the players has been pushed into playing some caster type and says that he flat out doesn't want to take levels of a psionic class that he'll never use, and that he'd like to play a necromancer instead. The GM looks absolutely livid. His knuckles are white, and he's clenching his jaw pretty hard, but he's in public, and he doesn't want to yell at the necromancer or blow up at the rest of us. He visibly takes slow, deep breaths and tells the necromancer that's fine, that he'll figure out a way to add some psionic levels to his character anyway. Again, the player tells him that in no way, shape, or form does he want that bolted forcefully onto his character. DM's friend is in the corner drawing her character that he rolled up for her. I finished working on my character in the meantime. I'm a Dark Elf Soul Knife because that's what I've been told I should play. Another friend was a Psychic Warrior, I think. The DM was like, "You should drive a psychic-powered motorcycle." Oh, right. I asked if I should begin to get a picture of my character from D&D related sources so I can find a cool Dark Elf picture. Nope, these Dark Elves all look like the Dark Elder from 40k. Huh, okay, so I guess I'm a pale-skinned, dark-haired BDSM lady. Neat? The rest of the character generation finally wraps up, and the GM asks if we can play at my house since his apartment is super small, and it'd be hard to accommodate. I check with the missus, and she's cool with it. I tell him, sure, is there anything that needs to be terrain crafted or 3D printed? He says no, that he doesn't need anything at the moment, that he's got a bunch of 40k stuff we can use. I must have had a confused look. He follows up quickly that the game will be D&D 3.5. Okay, alright then. We get out of the cramped little game store and into the setting summer sun, and we are on the sidewalk talking and deciding a start date. I tell everyone that I'd be happy to cook for the first session if folks want to chip in some money. Everyone does, except for the GM and his lady friend. Cool, no problem. If he's having some struggles in that area, I can cover for them. Definitely don't want to pressure them in front of everyone else. So we get a group chat set up in Messenger, and I announce that I'd like to make carne asada for everyone. It's been a big hit with other groups, and it's like a little taste of home. Everyone's totally down for that. Go to the meat place and pick up a bunch of skirt steak and really overspent. No problem though, everyone will get doggy bags for leftovers. Game day arrives, and I'm out on the deck starting to grill. It's close to arrival time, and I want everyone to have a nice warm meal. At this point, it's about 11 a.m. Everyone arrives, except the GM and his friend. Time goes by with no word from either of them. Nothing in Messenger or through text. Around 1:30 p.m., we get a ping in Messenger that the GM is absolutely livid because he's had to come out to where I live and, quote, "None of the stupid gas stations by you have a very particular energy drink that I want." He informs us he will be here in 30 minutes. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. I resume cooking, albeit in a much more sobered mood. The GM and his friend arrive at 2:30 p.m. and I had just finished cooking, after delaying a bit more again. This is his first time in my home, so naturally he walks in, kicks his shoes off across the living room, and stomps across the house to the screen door and proceeds to yell at me that my house is too far away from his apartment, that the area I live in is in no man's land. I apologize that he ran into so many problems getting to my home. I tell him that everyone else made it here without any problem. I tell him that there's other routes to get here, if that would help him, at least help him get here sooner. He tells me that I don't know what I'm talking about, and that he goes the way his GPS tells him to go. Rightio, my dude. He and his friend come out into the deck where the rest of us are. At this point, we didn't have money to put furniture out there yet, which he's happy to point out to me. Girl sits on the far side of the deck as far away as she can from the rest of us. She's got her head down and her arms around her legs like she's been a victim of trauma. Like, I've seen this behavior before. It's no bueno on any level. Anyways, I finish setting up the grill and we go down to the basement, and he tells me that the gaming room is awesome and he appreciates me hosting, and then tells me that the light isn't really good, so he wishes it was brighter. I must have had some kind of deflated look because he moved on from the topic to telling me that I was a good cook and he had some pointers to make things better. Whatever, man, just can you eat and let's get on with this. Through the span of eating our meal, he goes on to tell the group that he's an ex-felon who spent time in prison for drugs and violent crimes? Excuse me? Like, that's some stuff that you should probably share and lead with rather than show up at someone's home and inform your host of this information at dinner. Everyone around the table is silent and looking back and forth, and I sum up all the diplomacy in me and tell him that I don't tolerate that stuff in my home. He backpedals and tells me that it was another life and he's reformed now. I'm not reassured by this in the least. In my military service, I was a cop, so I'm running through 1,000 things in my head right now. I tell him about my time on the job and that I appreciate his honesty in the matter. I tell him that there will be no weapons or drugs in my home, and if there are any issues with that, we should sort them out in very short order. He continues to look a little nervous and tells me that he wouldn't do that. Great. Okay, by this time it's 3:30ish or so, and we're finally getting down to the game a few hours late. The whole first session has absolutely no interaction from us, the players. Instead, he's describing this glorious psionic city and their celestial god king / emperor, and tells us about their expensive military arm and how they're the pinnacle of the perfect psionic fighting force. He tells us at length how we are enlisted into this military, even though some of us aren't even from the same nation, but because of the prestige of it, we sought it out, I guess. Session ends with all of us sitting around having done nothing. Girl is across the table drawing and hasn't said more than like 3 words in the whole session. He begins to pack up and starts sighing. He begins ranting once again about the drive out to my home and how it's totally horrible. The rest of the group also makes alternate route suggestions, and he's equally dismissive of all of them. He says that he'll see us next Saturday. One of the players says that he can't make it the next few weeks because he's going to be out of town. GM starts to seethe that he'll have to postpone his game because that'll run into his own vacation that he planned to take. He throws up his arms and is like, whatever, we'll figure it out. He grabs his stuff and his friend, and they stomp up the stairs and slam the front door on their way out. Several weeks passed. In the meantime, it had been the tail end of the summer when we first met up, and now it was getting to the cool autumn and early winter. In the intervening time, we had gotten together as a group a couple more times to do some terrain crafting. Each time, the GM would tell me and the group at length how horrible a drive it was to get to my house. He was upset and disappointed that the lighting in my basement wasn't up to his expectations and standards. I went and got a strip of LED lights and built up a hanging system that would provide a great light for the table to craft. Just, trying to do something that would keep this guy from complaining about all the awful bits of my home. You could also kick him out of your home, but, whatever. He tells us that his whole campaign is already written and that whatever we do, we won't have any impact on the end game at all. This should have been my cue to grab my parachute and yeet the hell out of there. We got into another session where we were finally able to meet one another. I had somehow been nominated as the leader of the group because I was some kind of super special soul knife guy. Instead of trying to roleplay out, finally coming into contact with the rest of the team, he blew through that so that we could all talk to his NPCs, which went on at length about parts of the world that we had to go to do X and Y for our first mission, and that he'd take this super secret tunnel that nobody else knew about. We had our first combat where most of us were almost killed, but luckily his friend's super amazing tiger guy monk saved the day by defeating an ancient purple worm made of shadow and energy beams that shot out from 2 of its other heads. The tram we're on basically crashes into the tunnel, and all of us survive with 1 hit point each, except Tiger Monk Guy, who was only passively injured. GM continues reaching out to touch girl's hand and shoulder during this and previous sessions. Again, bad vibes. That session ended and another week passed before we got to the next game. Insert long-winded rants about the location of my home. The next Saturday arrives and my alarm wakes me up at 10 a.m. and there's already a bunch of texts in group chat about how horrible it is to drive to my home and that it's always this endless parade of trouble. Alright, fine, dude, I get it. I reply, look, dude, if you hate it that much, we don't have to play here. He flips out, tells me that I'm on a power trip for holding the gaming space over his head constantly. It should be noted that this has been the first time I've ever mentioned not playing in my home. He rage quits the chat. The girl takes over and says that she doesn't want any part of what's going on and that we should apologize. I tell her, and the rest of the group who had shown up already, that I think it's best that I depart the game because there seems to be some serious issues. The rest of the gaming group also dips out shortly afterwards. TLDR. Overly controlling ex-felon, GM railroads a bunch of people into playing his predetermined game with some weird 20-something-year age difference between this other girl he has a crush on, ? And then screams at me for saying that I'm happy to give up hosting. Rage quits and calls me a fascist. When did that happen? Is that a new detail being added in the TLDR? Anyway, thank you for taking the time to read this long, strange story. There are a lot of things in the story that fall outside the D&D sphere. There are also things that we've already talked about. I've talked extensively about railroading and DMPCs before. We're not going to go over it again. This DM clearly does not really care about group agency. It's all about his story, which is not good. Remember, the tabletop gaming group is not just the DM story or the DM's group. Everyone at the table is working together to create a story. The DM isn't the only one writing here. It's the players participating in a scenario that the DM comes up with. That's the way you should probably be thinking about it, at least. I know for some people, D&D kind of falls outside of normal social circles, but it really shouldn't. D&D, you're going to someone's home, and you need to treat it like you are going to someone's home. You need to be respectful. And I don't know if I have to say that, but I've unfortunately seen scenarios, maybe not as extreme as this, but definitely scenarios where people have acted rude just because, oh, it's D&D, we're here to have fun. But no, you're still visiting someone's home, you should act respectable. But you guys probably already understand that. Look, there's a lot more in this story that I'm gonna say this, I am not qualified to talk about. I'm smart enough to know that for more serious situations that this DM is describing, you should probably talk to someone else. Well, if you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories and want to let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then please subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. You are on the fastest available route to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.